Throughout my 20s, when I went to college, I was going for psychology, I was studying neurolinguistic programming, and every single year I kept changing careers because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And a lot of times when kids are growing up, we ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up, which is a great question. And the older I got, I realized what's more important is who you want to be when you grow up and how you want to show up in the world, things that you're passionate about, because if it's something you're not passionate about, it's going to start fizzling out. So each year when I was switching careers, I was trying to discover parts of myself that were coming out, and there were certain things that kept showing up about my personality, things that I needed to work on within myself, and regardless of what I did, how I felt was really going to be the most important thing for me. And then I ended up discovering Challenge Day, and I've been with the organization for this entire year, and Niedra was actually one of my trainers and genius teachers.
If you really knew me, you would know that at 21, I was the youngest person in my PhD program, and I remember being really, really proud of myself. I also remember being terrified. In fact, I was probably more afraid than I was excited, but you would have never known that that's how I actually felt, because I got so good at being the good kid and the smart kid that's kind of all I projected out to the world, And so all of the insecurities and the anxiety and things like that, I would mask over and do a lot of work to push down. That was not a sustainable method of dealing with my emotions and how I was feeling and negotiating academia at such a really young age. So I ended up leaving graduate school because I was very vulnerable to depression and anxiety and it's a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. So I left in order to figure myself out, figure out what I really wanted to do and to get healthy and learn better coping mechanisms. And in doing that work, I discovered Challenge Day. What I found there was that, what I was learning was that any kind of sustainable social change was really predicated upon individuals doing their own work. Their own individual work to heal whatever stuff they have going on that actually gets in the way of us being productive when we're out in the world. So Challenge Day was a kind of organization that started at the ground level that said, okay, let's give kids better tools.
We go to middle schools and high schools and do these social and emotional learning workshops. So I remember seeing it on MTV and I was like, I can't believe that there are schools that actually have these programs where they're teaching young people about social issues, about how to deal with their emotions in a positive, healthy way. Because I know for me, high school was really difficult. As a lot of people who have creative juices flowing in their mind, sometimes it doesn't fit like the stereotype or the norm or the cool club or anything like that, and that was me. And I remember feeling like I didn't really have a healthy outlet for a lot of this creativity to go. So when I saw the program on TV, I was just blown away, and I saw the impact that it had on young people and the adults as well. So each Challenge Day that we have about 20 to 30 adults that show up and volunteer. And it impacts them just as much as the young people. The day is really for both of them. And it kind of also bridges the gap between age, between race, between all these ways that we separate from each other. So I just saw it as a really powerful program.
So Challenge has been around since, 1987. We're an experiential social and emotional learning program. We partner with secondary schools across North America and Northern Europe to help the schools ignite greater safety and connection on their campuses through our program. So basically we get 100 kids and about 25 to 30 adults in a gym. We put them in a circle. We play a lot of music and we do a lot of icebreakers in the morning. We get weird and silly. We essentially push people outside of their comfort zone a little bit. We do a lot of activities that give the young people and the adults an opportunity to have conversations that begin to allow us to get to know each other a little bit better, but not in a terribly vulnerable way just yet, right? So we keep building safe space in the room, and eventually we get to a point of the day where we have a conversation about how we've been taught to not express our emotions, that throughout the course of our young lives we internalize a lot of messages that tell us, for a range of different reasons, why it's inappropriate or socially unacceptable to be expressive in different kinds of ways. But just because people tell us not to feel those feelings or express those feelings doesn't mean we stop feeling them. So where are they going? So we talk to the kids about something called an emotional balloon, this metaphor we use to talk about the place where we put all of those unexpressed emotions. And that a balloon that gets too full eventually pops, yes? So when we're looking at or seeing instances of school violence and things like that, that's what we're looking at. Kids who have really full balloons that don't have better tools to deal with what they have going on for them, so they lash out and they hurt others. Bullying epidemics, etc. So some of what we're doing is a paradigm shift to move away from this idea of bullies over here and victims over here, but to think about what's happening with those kids that are acting out like that. Can we bring more compassion to both sides? So after we share a little bit about our lives and talk about things that maybe we put into our balloons and the ways that we have, we use another metaphor of like people are like icebergs, and we say we only see 10% of the person, and the rest of that human being is below that waterline. And a lot of the things we're afraid for people to know about us, we tuck in that 90%. So the intention of the second half of the workshop is to give the young people and the adults an opportunity to talk about who they are below that waterline. Back in 1987, when Rich and Yvonne, our founders, started the organization, their insight was pretty simple. They basically said, hey, there's no such thing as a bad kid. No such thing as a bad kid, no such thing as a bad person. Just a lot of people walking around with accumulated stress, a lot of trauma, and they don't know what to do with it or how to engage those emotions effectively and safely. So we reasoned that if we wanted to create safer schools, we had to provide young people with the tools to effectively engage with and manage and express their emotions, and then to begin sharing that, putting some language to those experiences so they could talk to other people about what they were experiencing. And in doing that, we would cultivate more social awareness. It would help the young people begin to empathize with each other a bit more and create safer schools. So in short, Rich and Yvonne said if we want to have safer communities, safer schools, we have to really mobilize what's now being called social and emotional learning competencies. And there's basically 5 learning areas to social and emotional learning. Just to back that up a little bit, in some ways, as social and emotional learning feels a little trendy right now in education, and for all of our friends that we work with who are in education, they're just like, oh my gosh, there's like every year there's like something else that we're like trying to take on. What's interesting and important, I think, about this particular thread is one, a lot of the research that's gone into supporting SEL both in curriculum development and policy initiatives is a lot of years and years of research being drawn from neuroscience, clinical psychology, childhood development, emotional intelligence, all these fields contributing and converging to show us that young people learn better. One, when they kind of clear away all of the stress and emotional barriers to making themselves present to learning. And there's like a lot of really awesome neurological studies behind that around like what happens when I'm too stressed out to learn, the parts of my brain that begin to shut down, there's just too much cortisol hanging out up there, right? So in any case, what we're doing with the social and emotional learning areas is turning them into experiences for the young people, creating activities where they can actually practice being more self-aware, practice being more socially aware, practice relationship skills with one another. That's kind of the broad strokes. Everyone in the workshop does an activity called If You Really Knew Me. Each person in a small group has a chance to complete the sentence. If you really knew me, you would know this about me. If you really, really knew me, you would also know this. We talk about it in terms of dropping that waterline, as if we were that iceberg, to share like what's really going on in our lives. What the young people end up discovering is that they have a lot more alike, and a lot more in common than they have different. Old rivalries you see fall away. Like, it's actually a really beautiful process to create more connection on their campuses.